welcome to Malcolm Out Loud TV. This is Shannon Rose filling in for Malcolm Out Loud. Today's guest has proudly served the United States in the armed forces. He's defended us in the war in Iraq and other Middle East conflicts. He's Michel Escudie, I know him as Scud, and he's here to bring a positive light to the military. Thank you for being on here today.
Yeah, good to be here, Shannon. Thank you.
What's on everybody's mind is Osama bin Laden. He was killed. And is the war on terror, is it over? That's what everybody wants to know.
Well, the killing of Osama bin Laden, I think it's yet to be seen what the impact, the full impact that's had on the Taliban. I know it's provided closure to a lot of Americans and a lot of the families of those that were killed on 9/11. But right now, we are looking into how deeply involved he was with Taliban operations, and it's yet to be seen on what the impact is going to be on the future with Taliban operations.
Do you think that's some kind of closure, though, for the United States and for those families that were impacted?
Well, it has to be. I think they've waited. I think it involved a lot of patience, a lot of wondering when we would get him and when he would be killed. We're beyond that now, and it's an opportunity for the families and really every American to heal.
Let's start from the beginning. How did you actually get into the armed forces?
Well, I joined the Air Force almost 20 years ago. I was living in Miami, and I just admired many role models, people I knew, people I read about, and for example, my grandfather who fought in World War II, and I never thought I'd stick it out for 20 years. I thought I would just do a few years and be happy with that service, but the 20 years has gone by so quickly.
Now, what do you actually do with the armed service?
Well, right now I work in the directorate that handles public affairs, and I work with media, but primarily I work with speeches and reaching out to audiences, key audiences, audiences we may call non-choir, people who we want to enlighten and inform across the United States.
But it must be pretty cool. I mean, you get to hang out with the president of Afghanistan. I've been right there. Generals, the president of the United States. Do you ever get nervous being out there?
Oh, you always get nervous and you always get anxious. But like anything with the military, training helps you prepare for that. And then when you're in a situation where you're anxious, you have to rely on that training. And I have had a wonderful career. It's brought me to over 40 countries. I've been to places like Djibouti, Eritrea, Kazakhstan, and I've been in the presence of some world leaders. I wouldn't trade those memories for anything.
Now, speaking of memories, being away from your family, I'm sure, is very hard. Talk a little about the family environment within the military, and now that there's talk of troops coming, back from Afghanistan, what the reaction is among them.
Well, I think we are finding out what the full impact of these constant deployments has on families. When you're a military member, you are deployed with your unit, and you serve with that unit. For example, when I was overseas in primarily Southwest Asia nations, Qatar, Iraq, and Afghanistan, I was there for almost 2 years. You have a group of soldiers and airmen and Marines and sailors that you serve with. And Shannon, what I got to tell you is they're your family. They're your primary means of support, even emotional support. And you sleep, you breathe, you live, you eat with them, and you're under some pretty hairy situations with them. And I think we have to admit that that deployed family you're with, your military family, does compete with your family at home. And the military now, through intervention and through identifying that, where maybe in the past there has been a denial about that, and an environment where soldiers and all of our veterans couldn't speak up so readily as they could have in the past, but I think they can now. There's a lot of intervention going on when troops come home from these deployments, because the military is getting it, if you will, that there's an impact on the families back home. There are sacrifices and compromises that they're making with these extended deployments and these repeat employments, which many people didn't sign up for. And I have to tell you, the families surely didn't sign up for this.
So I'm sure being on the front lines, I mean, it has a mental impact, not only a physical impact on your well-being that they have to get help with, and that's what they're doing right now.
Well, you know, Shannon, you say front lines. I was never on the front lines. I was in a support role, but I was in those areas of Iraq, Fallujah, all over, and we'll deploy our soldiers all over the world and in some pretty dangerous situations. So you don't have to be in the front lines. You can just be serving overseas in many areas, and still being separated from family is being separated from family wherever you serve.
Now, you hear the negative propaganda out there and some of the bias and about the military and what can be done. What can you tell the people out there that they may not know about the military that you can inform them about?
Well, it is a great way of life, and it does prepare you for life in the private sector and the civilian sector through training. To succeed in the military, you have to seek education and seek training. And when you look at a word which I think applies to the military, and that is meritocracy. The harder you work, the more challenges you seek and you achieve, you're going to be rewarded in the military, both through promotions, through challenging assignments, and really just knowing that you served and you had a rewarding career. We'll never run out of opportunities to serve in the military.
Also, there was talk about the military not receiving the proper protection for them to be able to protect themselves out on the warfield. Tell us a little about that. Has things changed where they're able to get what they can out there and get what they need?
Well, there's a challenge, of course, in equipping our military, because we have to ask ourselves if we're planning for the last war or planning for the future war. And I've got to take you down the road of the nature of the enemy that we're fighting. We're fighting an unconventional enemy who don't play by the rules, who don't have rules of engagement that we are held to, that don't subscribe to a law of armed conflict that we are held to. And there's a asymmetrical nature, if you will, in dealing with these enemy. And their tactics will change every day, every week. And we have to change our tactics. And that involves better equipping ourselves, taking advantage of the best technology and innovations we have. It's a challenge because the enemy every day is changing their tactics.
And speaking of the enemy, the Taliban, and the latest report is that they're trying to make men's or trying to work stuff out with the Taliban. And, you think the Taliban, you think the enemies. Could there ever be the U.S., having some kind of coalition? Because you worked with the coalition forces, with a group such as the Taliban who are so extreme.
Well, if you're talking about reconciliation and the efforts over there, I'm not too familiar with what's going on. I think the story yet is going to be told, just not today. I don't know how far that's going to go and what the benefit is for us right now.
How does the other countries feel about our military here? What is the perception of the U.S. military to other countries? Since, again, you've worked with, we've had lunch with some of the coalition forces out there. So some of the nicest guys I've met,
sure,
have been with the other, countries that are supporting us.
Well, you have an opportunity to talk with me today, and I've served with over 300 officers from 50 plus different countries that have come to my headquarters and served with me. And you have countries represented in our coalition from Jordan, from Qatar, from Pakistan, from the Dominican Republic, all over the world. And they have signed on to support us in the global war on terrorism. Their support in working with us is energetic. I mean, we really have a good time, and we stay focused on what we're doing.
And we think of the military, we think of war, but there's also peace. And the military likes to, offer their services to help out, whether it be an event such as a Katrina or other things like that. Talk a little about the peace efforts by the military also.
Domestically, we obviously do get involved in disaster relief, and I know our Guard does that, and our reserve forces do that. Abroad, we have to partner with Department of State. And what we're finding is diplomacy with defense and with a strong military has to work together in these countries. And we have to work hand in hand, our military, but also sharing and partnering with the diplomatic efforts that, for example, our Department of State folks are doing in all these countries.
Speaking of all the countries that you visited, has there been anything that you've done in the military that just pulled on your heartstrings?
Well, I've unfortunately had friends that I've lost overseas, and I've been in some areas, for example, Fallujah, and I've been in some field hospitals where I saw young men and women, but in my case it was young men, 19, 20, 21, injured, and that has been pretty tough, because when you come home and you know that some of them didn't come home, you do carry a little guilt, but also you do realize that life is short, life is precious. And so that clearly is going to pull on your heartstrings.
And, how important is it for the United States to get behind and support the U.S. Armed Forces? What are some of the things that they can do still to the guys overseas?
Well, there's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of nonprofit agencies that are supporting the military. There's a lot of opportunities for you to donate and send things overseas. There's a lot of rules and regulations that have to be followed and all that, but I don't think there's any shortage of opportunities to support the military. And from where I sit, we are getting a lot of support.
And as far as, we can't talk about some things because of intelligence and whatnot. Do you feel that that has changed any? I think that a lot of the stuff that went down with Osama bin Laden was that we had great intelligence, that everybody worked together and being able to capture, find them, do whatever they could do, capture the enemy. And I think that's a good thing that, of all the detractors in the past that said, well, U.S. is having problems there, but we killed Osama bin Laden.
Well, this is a question I've had before, and I know since 2001, we have had efforts which we call interagency efforts, and we have found that working with the CIA, the FBI, the Department of the Treasury, the Department of Agriculture, where we haven't worked with them in the past, is going to solve a lot of our problems a lot quicker.
And talk a little about the other agencies within the armed forces. You just don't have the Air Force, you have the Navy, the Marines. I guess it's kind of a coalition in a sense. They all work together too, I guess, especially in the fight on terror.
Right. Each of our services are distinct, and what they bring to the fight is different. You can't ask of the Air Force what you ask of the Army. I have the pleasure, and have had for the last 8 years, of working with the Navy, the Army, the Marines, and our Coast Guard. And it's a different culture, but you learn how to work through that. But it's not easy. It's not easy assimilating and working with the different services.
Now, United States Central Command is based at Micheal Air Force Base, and talk a little about the changes there. I know that they've built up different areas. They've, added more dorms, more areas to live in, and just kind of from the past. I remember first going there, the different air shows they've had there. Talk a little about the changes at Micheal Air Force Base for those that aren't from Florida that do watch us all over the world.
Well, I'm just limited to talk about where I work, and we do have a new headquarters building that is being built. It's going to be, I think, opened in August of 2011. Around the Air Force Base, there is a lot of construction because that base services many different units. Co-located with us at MacDill Air Force Base is Special Operations Command. It's a pretty big operation. So there's no shortage of construction that I've seen, and I've been there 8 years, but in the last 2 or 3 years I've seen there's just a lot of construction going on.
And you've had a change of command from General Abizaid, I think, and now it's General Petraeus, correct?
Well, no, General Petraeus has left. The commander right now at Central Command is General James Mattis.
Okay. How are they different as generals?
At my level, it's hard to see. They focus on strategic efforts. Much of their job and much of their time is spent overseas with the 20 or so countries in our area of operations. So at my level, I'm a mid-level guy, so I don't see the change so much.
Okay, and again, we're joined here with Michel Escudie. Scud, I want to thank you for joining us here on Shannon Out Loud.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for thinking it's important.
Yeah, I just want to be able to tell people, the positive light of the military and how important it is. My nephew has been, he is part of the military, so is my niece, and they all, everybody battles, to make our country better, and that's what you do also, and I appreciate that, and thank you for doing that.
My pleasure, Shannon.
And remember, when you see a military person, say thank you. I'm Shannon Rose, filling in for Malcolm Out Loud. Remember, get involved, get loud, think on the brink.